Welcome to Inspired by Faith, the program of the Columbus Catholic Women's Conference. I'm Michelle Fanley, and I'm joined each program in the studio with my friend Emily Jaminet. This is a show to help you be inspired by our Catholic faith, live out the gospel message, and deepen your relationship with Jesus Christ. We hope the show provides an uplifting 30 minutes to help refresh your soul and strengthen your faith. As it was born out of our friendship, we hope it encourages you to deepen and develop spiritual friendships with your sisters in Christ. Well, hello, Emily. How are you?
We are back to the grind, aren't we?
I know, back to school, back to reality, right?
Back to everything. Everything is back in place, including a lot of book clubs, a lot of faith sharing groups. So I'm just excited. I love September when everything
starts
back and kicks back, and it's perfect for our session that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, we are delighted to talk about a new, fresh topic, but something is very near and dear to our heart. We're going to be talking with Marcia Stokman and Colleen Hutt, who are with Well-Read Mom. So their mission is to help women join book clubs and become well-read, but also develop spiritual friendship.
Oh my gosh.
That is our favorite.
This
right?
is totally our favorite. And I think of all the years that we've done these faith sharing groups and book clubs. And, I just am so encouraged by this topic because a lot of times we get invited to book clubs and they're not necessarily the best books. So today we are going to go strong into why you need faith sharing books.
Yes, absolutely. So Marcia Stokman is a writer, speaker, and the president and founder of Well-Read Mom, an organization that accompanies women in the reading of great books and spiritual classics. She's the author of The Well-Read Mom, Read More, Read Well. Marcia and her husband, Peter, live in Crosby, Minnesota, and have 7 children and 17 grandchildren. Colleen Hutt is the director of literary evangelization for Well-Read Mom. She has worked as a director of children and adult formation in several parishes in Florida and Wisconsin. She's a catechist, a focus facilitator for marriage prep, and a retreat leader. Colleen and her husband, Colin, live in Wisconsin, and they have 5 children and 1 grandchild. So the Well-Read Mom is this fabulous organization that is committed to helping women take care of their hearts by reclaiming time for books and friendship. Two of my favorite things.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
So we are very delighted to welcome both Marcia and Colleen to the show today. Welcome, ladies.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
You are so
much.
We
Happy
are so,
to be here.
We are so glad that you could join us. So we'll take turns since we've got 2 guests and 2 hosts.
It's already a party.
That's right. But we always ask our guests, the first question we ask everyone is if they can share a little bit about their faith journey. So Marcia, can you start?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a Catholic family, and then when my husband and I had 4 children, we left the Catholic Church for 3 years. And during that time, we really found the faith in a deeper way for the first time. The Lord drew us back home, and I'm so grateful for that, and also grateful for my Protestant friends. But it is great to be back in the church, and we have a full life in the church.
And what about you, Colleen?
Yeah, I would say I grew up in a very kind of typical, normal Catholic home. We went to Mass on Sundays. We went to fish fries on Friday nights. We always prayed before meals. But I would say there was a life that was kind of missing. My parents were incredibly generous and wonderful people, great parents. But I don't feel like I really encountered Christ until I met actually a professor from Notre Dame. His name is Dave Schindler, Sr., who left Notre Dame and then ended up being appointed to be the first chair of the John Paul II Institute for Marriage and Family in D.C., and through my friendship with him, I really had an intellectual awakening to the faith, what the faith really was. And then my heart awakened to wanting to really be in a relationship with Christ and having it be something personal and radical and a whole lifelong commitment. So that kind of, I think Professor Schindler cracked that seed that my parents had planted in my heart and really poured water on it. And then it just continued to grow through my life at the University of Notre Dame and through my study of great books. And then finally, with my amazing friendship with Marcy, has just been a real gift of how my faith has been enriched through friendship and through reading.
That's amazing. And, you know, I think that this topic is so unique because we want to understand, you know, what is the well-read life, you know, and why are you directing this towards moms? Is this something in which you saw a need in the church or just a need in your own life and you really wanted to expand it? So we'll start with Marcy.
Well, I didn't really know anything was starting. It just kind of happened, and it happened this way. I I was a grandmother for the first time. My daughter Beth was in St. Paul, Minnesota with her first child, Catherine, and she called me one day and I heard this piercing cry of loneliness in her voice. And she said, Mom, and she was almost in tears. And she said, I'm not going back to this mother's group. I've been there 3 times and everyone's just talking about their kids and maybe what kind of diaper to buy. She said, Mom, isn't there a place after college where women get together and talk about the real questions in life? And at that time, I had been speaking in northern Minnesota, where I live, to some mothers of preschoolers, and reading had kind of fallen by the wayside in my own life. I mean, I read professional journals for my work. I read books on homeschooling. I read spiritual books, and I read the Bible every day, but I wasn't reading literature. And so I gave this series of talks to these mothers, and I called the talk Well-Read Mom, which just came to me, this title. I wanted to see what the women were reading. But each time I gave this little talk, I drove home sad because, in truth, not one woman was reading quality literature for its own sake. And I wasn't either. So this little talk I was giving, I thought was just making the women feel like here's one more area I'm failing as a mom, and that was not my intention. So when Beth called that day with this cry for a way to connect with other women in a meaningful way, her heart, her longing merged with my longing to read more and read well. And our desires merged, and just like that, we decided to start a book club where we'd read great and worthy books together. So she gathered friends in St. Paul. I gathered friends where I live in northern Minnesota, and we decided to try this for 5 years. And that was our little beginning. I had a few women in my living room. She had women in her living room. That was 13 years ago. And this year will be our 13th year. And we are hopefully going to have 10,000 members following along with the Well-Read Mom Book Club.
Wow, that is amazing and beautiful that people are reading and enjoying it. And because it is so fulfilling. I am totally bookish. So my stress relief, my enjoyment is, I love, love, love reading. And it is so sad that people are not reading anything but their Facebook anymore. So, or Instagram, or, I'm old and still saying Facebook, but so now you ladies have a brand new book through Ave Maria Press, The Well-Read Life. Nourish your soul through deep reading and intentional friendship. So what was the inspiration for this book, Colleen? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sure, yeah. It strikes me as your mission on this podcast is to refresh your soul and deepen your faith. And I just am struck by the similarities between our titles and what you've been doing on this podcast. That's why it's such an honor and pleasure to be here. Um, Nourishing your soul through deep reading and intentional friendship. When Marcy started Well-Read Mom, the summer she started it, I was working as a director of religious education at a parish. And I was searching for speakers on Flannery O'Connor to come in and give a lecture at our parish as one of the date nights that I was trying to cultivate at our parish. And somehow Marcy's name popped up on the other end of that Google search, and I called her, and we ended up spending hours talking. And she said, I can't come to your parish. I'm starting this new thing called Well-Read Mom. We just had our first year, but, you should try it. And I said, I've got all my parish programs kind of set for the year, but thanks. I'm going to keep this in mind and I'm sure we'll reconnect. And a year later, I discerned that I really needed to be back in the home full time. So I retired from my parish ministry position and said, this is what I want. I want to start reading more deeply. I think I was the typical mom who had a bunch of kids. I loved to read. And then slowly over time, it kind of faded away. And I didn't make that choice when my kids were young. It was very hard to fit in things, and I would often do it late at night and fall asleep. So when I met Marcy, it was this kind of reawakening of what I truly loved. So I decided to go to the Well Read Mom Conference. I think it was the second year you guys had a conference, and I had the date wrong. And I show up, and it's the last lecture is about to start, and I go, I hear the last lecture, I go to the bathroom, I'm crying. I can't believe I messed up the date. How could I do this? And someone said to Marcy, someone ran and got Marcy and said, there's this crazy lady who's crying in the bathroom. You might want to go check in on her. And Marcy came in and she said to me, Colleen, don't worry about it. We'll just bring the whole conference to you, to your new group in Milwaukee. And that's how our friendship started. And it's been now, gosh, 10 years of amazing friendship. And this book really came about through that call of being reawakened to beauty and to humanity. And we see in Well Read Mom, once women are a part of the Well Read Mom, they get it. They understand what we're about, but we have to do some kind of pre-education to the people that don't know who we are, don't know what they're missing in their reading life, don't know that something more is out there for them. And a great example I had of this recently, I was getting my nails done, and I have this wonderful woman who does my nails every once in a while as a treat. And I was telling her about this book, and we're going back and forth. And I ended up leaving her a copy because I had the Well Read Life in my car. So I ended up leaving a little note with her. And she wrote me a text and just said I was crying. I had no idea how much I was missing. I just ordered Dante's Inferno and I can't wait to start. And this is a woman who did not have a liberal arts education background, but she heard the call to awaken her heart. She understood that she's missing something and she decided to take a step.
That's really beautiful. And, it's interesting that you even mentioned this podcast because it's really a fruit of a friendship, a fruit of the Friendship Project and many books that Michelle and I have written together. So when you do write together, it's a gift because you bring two different perspectives that mold this important mission of, and in this book, reawakening, I think for a lot of women, the gift of reading. And, in the book, you also share about how in this digital age, it's really dulled the intellect, imagination, and even our spiritual capacities. So maybe, we could talk a little bit about that because gosh, our phones are so flashy and those pictures are so beautiful, that pop up all the time. But we really have to be deliberate about what are we putting into our brain and the gift of reading. So I gave you a lot to talk about. Maybe we'll start with Marcy, and then Colleen, you can close up on this question.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the way we read has changed. It happened with the smartphone coming into our life, and we've lived through a time of cataclysmic change. And because we've lived through it, I think we often don't realize what we've lost. And digital reading on our phones, it encourages us to have partial attention. You're clicking, you're scrolling, you have this onslaught of information coming at you. And so we develop, or we are in a state of constant partial attention. And so reading from print, hanging on to that capacity or growing in the capacity to read from print focuses us. It teaches us to receive, to slow down, to imagine, to foster critical thinking, to have thoughts, it grabs our memory. We think about things we haven't thought about in a long time. And so we want to continue to foster this kind of deep reading. It's imperative that we do as a culture. Colleen, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that. According to recent research, Americans are spending almost 7 hours a day in front of screens. That has had a drastic effect on our health. The way we relate to other people is changing. We're not only reading now digitally, we're also communicating digitally, and we're not being in front of people. And this diminishes us as human beings. We really need to be in front of people. And that's a work and a mission that we can't do through screens. It really needs to happen face to face in front of people. So I think that's something we really need to take seriously. As our Surgeon General has recently pointed our attention, the harm of social media and the like. But in a deeper and more spiritual way, Jesus Christ is the Word made flesh, right? He is the Word. And we have to understand what words mean. We have to understand who Christ is. We have to understand the stories of our own life. So reading is kind of a prerequisite almost for prayer, I would say, because it does sustain our attention. It cultivates an awareness of others. And it's kind of the pre-work that we do to exercise our heart. Alistair McIntyre, in his book After Virtue, said that man is essentially a storytelling animal, but a teller of stories that aspire to truth. And this is what we want to do in Well-Read Mom. We want to read stories that aspire to truth and teach us something about the human condition.
Well, Marcy, now we talked about reclaiming some leisure time and the ability to read. Most moms these days, they're working full time. They're volunteering for 500 different activities at school and parish and, everything else. They're driving their kids around and they literally get into bed. And if they even try to pick up a book, they fall asleep. So how can you even start reclaiming this leisure time and making time for reading in your life?
Oh, that's a good question. It sometimes feels impossible. That's the number one reason that women give, I don't have time. And sometimes I think an underlying part of that might be, I'm afraid I can't focus anymore. I'm afraid I can't read the kind of books you're reading. But when we say I don't have time, we want to challenge each other to reclaim time, because it takes an affection for your own life to have a beautiful life, to be in front of what's good and true and beautiful, and literature. The kind of books we read do that, help us be in front of that. We have more, we need to retake control of our time. I think being in a book club like Well-Read Mom, for example, you have a time on the calendar, third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. I don't have to play phone tag. I just know I'm going to meet up with these women. And there's an accountability when you're in a group, because I want to bring something to the table. I want to also receive what my friends have to give. So I do this reading, this solitary reading. It might be 10 minutes a day. You read in the time you have, but make a commitment to it. It might be a really small step, but be faithful. And then read what you have, leave guilt behind, suspend judgment on yourself, just get started. And then when you go to the group, even if you haven't finished the book, but you will have something to say because you've done some reading. And then you have something to share. You have sort of a diving board to jump off of. You have a starting point. It's not just conversation about how busy we all are. There's actually something that you're talking about in this guided discussion. And this deepens friendship because you listen to the other women, you receive them, you see their facial expressions, you see their heart. You might cry together. You might you grow in friendship. It's meaningful. It's my one of my friends said this is sacred time. You know, we leave our phones at the door. And being in this group, one woman, she started reading and she did not finish a book for 2 years, but she was faithful to keep at it. And now she's a regular reader and she finishes the books. So success looks different for every woman, but when you have an affection for yourself and say, instead of saying, I don't have time, say, what do I want? How do I really want to live? This is my life. Am I a better wife and mother when I take care of my heart? So it starts with reclaiming what you want. And so that's my answer. I don't know, Colleen, I'm sure you have more.
No, I think that really kind of nails it. I think Marcy, you and I have talked about how John Paul II had said, and I can't remember if it's in his letter to women where he says that the most important thing that women will do is reclaim leisure. And I think that that really is up to us. You know, we can set the pace of our own family life and we can banish guilt for feeling guilty that we're not doing and we're being. And that is a shift of mind that we talk a little bit about in the Well Read Life book. Um, the idea of leisure, you know, and we have a chapter where we're talking about Joseph Pieper, who makes a distinction between two different kinds of time, or two different kinds of work: ratio work and intellectus work. And ratio work is the work that is what we do when we measure, when we're productive, when we're doing stuff. But intellectus work is the imagination and the intuition and the prayer and the slowing down. And he says that's actually the more important work. We've reduced our concept of work to something much more shallow than what is deserving of the human person. And that's what we want to reclaim.
All right, you've convinced me. I need more time to read. I'm like gearing up over here. Does my Audible count, or do I actually have to get a book in hand? It sounds like I need to get a book in hand.
Well, you do what you can in the time you have, right? So I think Audible is an option. It can be a great option, especially if your work involves sitting in a chair all day in front of a screen. You might be able to listen to a book while you're driving. It's important that we don't multitask while we're listening to an Audible book, because it takes away the enjoyment, you know, if you're not really paying attention. But we also want to maintain our ability to read from print. And it's a skill we don't want to lose, because it connects and grows different parts of our brain. And I think we do a disservice to lose that capacity to read deeply.
You should do it, Emily. I mean, I do read on my phone, I will say, because we're just putting kids to bed and I have usually like an hour. And so that's the way I started reading again, is when I put the kids to bed, read on a phone or a Kindle, and be able to use that time instead of scrolling on my social media. So,
well, I do have physical books in my purse. I'm looking at them, but I only typically read just Catholic literature or Catholic books. So I'm very excited about the Well Read Life, because I think that it can awaken literature. And a lot of times people invite us to book clubs, but for me, if it's a secular book club, I'm just not really sure, you know, the undertones and the themes. So my question for you, Marcy and Colleen, is what book we're coming to the very end, you know, where should I start? Where should everyone start? I know we should get the book, but do you have a recommendation as an easy read to get reading again?
Well, I can start. I think one thing about, like, if you join a Well Read Mom group, we've figured this out for you. So we have the list. It's really curated. It's a thoughtful list. There's a reason why we've chosen each book. And these are books that are true to, they awaken the questions, the human questions, and they're true to the way the world works, right? They're in line with our Judeo-Christian, they align with reality. And so we're very selective about our books. An easy book to start with might be The Pearl by John Steinbeck, which is one we're reading this year. It's a novella, so it's shorter. And it's always great to be able to discuss it with someone if you can. And Colleen, what about you?
We don't want to cut you ladies off, but we only have 2 minutes, and we want to get in where our listeners can find your book and how they can join the Well-Read Mom.
Ooh, great question. Well, you can find our book on Ave Maria Press. It's coming out Friday, September 13th. And that would be, or on Amazon, wherever you order books, but Ave Maria on Amazon, and also the Well-Read Mom. You can order it directly off of our site as well. We would love to have more people join us in this really armchair revolution of taking back the arts and taking back culture and growing in your faith through Well-Read Mom and through great literature. So join us. You can become a member for $49.95 a year. You'll get a reading companion, summer magazine, monthly, 2 monthly audios. Everything is already done for you. You don't need to come up with questions. We give you a reading companion that's a 140-page book introducing all the authors, introducing the books, things to look for, discussion questions, audios to play at the beginning and end of every meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It's all set up.
Awesome. And we are going to close in prayer in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear Lord, open my eyes to see what is beautiful, my mind to know what is true, and my heart to love what is good. For Jesus' sake, amen. We thank you for joining us today on Inspired by Faith. We hope you are blessed and inspired by this episode. To find out more about the Columbus Catholic Women's Conference, visit columbuscatholicwomen.com. And to hear more about my and Emily's work, please sure to check out inspirethefaith.com.